welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Katie. I'm a full-time sketchbook artist, and today I'm going to be sharing a sketchbook tour of my watercolor sketchbook. I do use a lot of mixed media. There's a bit of mixed media in here as well, but I have generally used watercolor as my base. I've started using watercolor earlier this year in 2025, and I'm really loving it, so I'm excited to share the work I've been creating with it. If you've been on my channel before, you might have seen some of my other sketchbook tours, and generally I do split them in half. This one is 60 pages. Usually I use the Royal Talens Art Creations, which is 80 pages. So it's a little bit smaller, so this should be a little bit quicker. But let me tell you about this sketchbook first. So this is the Hahnemuhle Watercolor Book. This is cold pressed A5, 200 GSM, and I have done a whole review about this sketchbook. So I'll leave a link to that up there if you're interested, where I talk more about the paper itself and show you how it works with other mediums. So this is the sketchbook, and so far I'm really enjoying it. I'm definitely going to be purchasing it again. As I say, it's not finished yet, but I am over halfway, and I feel like I'm filling it up pretty quickly. And generally, I do work in lots of different sketchbooks. I choose depending on size, depending on the media that I want to use, but because I am on a watercolor kick, I think that's why this has filled up pretty quickly so far. So without further ado, let me show you the first half of my watercolor sketchbook tour. So I generally always skip the first page. I definitely could have put something on here because it does open nice and flat. But we'll start here. I started this in March 2025. I'm recording this at the end of April, so a month or so actually. I don't know when in March 2025 I started this, but I know it was Food Month on Patreon. A lot of the work in here is food and drink related, and then you'll see when I change themes because that really influences what I am painting and drawing at the time. So this was my first foray into food and drink painting, and I decided to paint a loaf of bread, so I just bought some sourdough. This was just after 30 Days of Sketchbook Joy ended, and that was a very full month of daily art, and I was trying to keep up that momentum but also take a little bit of a break. I do like how this turned out. I can definitely see I was still a little bit apprehensive and nervous about using my watercolors. I think I can definitely see that I was a bit hesitant putting down color. I definitely feel like I've built up my confidence, and I think you'll probably see that throughout these pages as well. I did add on some collage, so the sticker from the packaging and also a little bit of the label as well. And then I really enjoy sort of adding on typography. Sometimes I do that in my work, so I've done that up here. I just think this is a fun spread. I really like adding in some journaling as well, so you'll see that throughout as well, just because I think it makes things more personal and I really want that connection in my sketchbook. So this was just watercolor and some colored pencils on top, which has been my go-to in this sketchbook so far. Next one were just these jars that I filmed, which is in a Patreon process video when I was talking about all the food and drink month. So a lot of these, including this one, I did record, so that's over on Patreon. And the dimensions aren't perfect on these. There's definitely some that are wider and taller than they should be, but I do like how they turned out. Again, I was drawing from observation, just like I did with the bread, and I think that was really nice. I often use references, but it's nice to draw from life sometimes. And again, working with watercolor and colored pencils on top, as well as a bit of acrylic marker just to add on the white details. But I like this one. I think this one's my favorite because I didn't overdo it. So you can see there where I've left the white of the page. I think that works better than adding on the highlights on top. So I think I prefer that. I didn't know if it was finished. I feel like it feels a bit unfinished for me just because there's so much white space and I'm not used to that. But I'm pretty pleased with it anyway. Next up was from our first Patreon live stream for Food and Drink Month, and we were illustrating a recipe. If you're interested in any of the Patreon information that I do talk about, because there's quite a few in here, all the replays are available as soon as you sign up, depending on your tier. So this one is on there. This was really fun. I had definitely learned a lot already about painting food and how much we sort of rely on our memories for food rather than necessarily needing the reference. So that was really fun, and I wasn't working from observation here. I was using references, but again using my own knowledge of food to fill this in. So just doing all the different ingredients and then the salad bowl. I really love how playful this is. So very vibrant, lots of colour, and definitely the sort of thing I was picturing when I did come up with the food and drink theme. Again, this was a base of watercolour, colour pencils on top, and also some Neocolor as well. I think this one is probably my favourite spread in the sketchbook, and this was painted in a few different sittings. Again, I recorded some of this for that process video on Patreon. I did the Danishes whilst I was away on a little break in Somerset, so that wasn't recorded, but I'm really happy with how I painted this. This was when I really felt like my confidence was growing with watercolour, especially with building up the layers. I think that's the thing that's been the biggest learning curve for me, is building it up from light to dark and building up those layers, rather than when I was used to using gouache, which was obviously a lot more opaque, or just having the colour right there. So it's definitely been a learning curve, but I really love how this turned out. So I did those two first, and then I had a big blank gap, so I added on this panel. Really like how things are coming outside of the panel. I think that's really playful. And then I had a gap up here, so I just added another panel in there. These are all based on our little trip to Frome, which was in March, and I did take quite a lot of photographs, so this wasn't drawn at the cafe, this was just drawn afterwards. But again, I really like all of the colours. I'm really enjoying having my watercolours just so that I've got all of those different colours, and I will be doing an updated watercolour palette tour soon. This was from the packaging from when we bought these Danishes, and then I just added on the rest of the lettering. So again, trying to blend in the sort of journaling vibes alongside my sketchbooks, which I really like. Now this one was painted on location, so the very first time that I've drawn in a cafe. And that was a bit out of my comfort zone, well, very out of my comfort zone for me. I don't mind painting plein air, like in the forest and landscapes, which is my usual sort of subject, but I do find it quite nerve-wracking going to a place where I'm surrounded by people who aren't artists, and there's a lot of people around me. So I did go to this cafe and I took my watercolours, and I'm really proud that I did it. It's not the best work I've ever made, but it was the fact that I did it and sort of pushed through that anxiety and created anyway. I also filmed this, so it was like another layer of anxiety by taking my tripod and having this giant camera on my table, but I'm really glad I did. I just added on some typography up here, again I've mentioned that already, and a bit of journaling, and then my avocado toast. So I like this, don't love this. I didn't really have the right colours for their crockery, so it was like a turquoise, and that's when I realised I needed a turquoise in my palette. So I've built up my collection of watercolours quite quickly over the last few months, but I've really used them a lot to learn what I'm missing and which ones would be helpful to add into my palette. So this was watercolour and coloured pencils again. Pretty quick, I didn't stay there too long, but it was nice to have a reward of this delicious avocado on toast when I was done. Oh, this one was so fun. So I was feeling a little bit burnt out after the 30 days of sketchbook joy, and this really was a tonic for me. This was a session on Patreon, on Zoom, where we were drawing food markets. I have got another spread from the same session, but this was the first one we did. These were our warm-ups, so we did two 10-minute ones, and then this one was 40 minutes. I used brush pens here, so there's some brush pens and coloured pencils, and then some watercolour as well. So really using quite a mix of media here to build up these colours, and I love how vibrant it is. I really like how the turquoise echoes from over here, from our warm-up, to the window frames behind this man. I did add in a man. I don't often draw people, but that was nice, and I'm pleased with how he turned out. And then trying to keep it quite loose, so there's not loads of detail on these fruit, but I feel like there's enough, and this spread is just really colourful and makes me very happy. This was the second spread from that session, so another 40-minute timer for us to paint on. Again, trying to get that balance of looseness and detail. 40 minutes was enough for me. I could have spent longer, but I do like that I didn't overwork it. I think having those timers really helps me to stay loose, but also to not get too bogged down in the details and not strive for that perfectionism that you could do if you don't have that timer. It does help me to stay really energetic with my marks, and I really like how a lot of the colours have blended here where it was wet on wet because I didn't have time to wait for it to dry. But that worked really well for some of the fruits, so you do get a lot of different colours. I did also add on some brush pens on top, which worked nicely, so a real mix of media here, but mostly watercolour and pencils. So yeah, just a really fun one. I do like how there is some white space here, so it's not too full. This one I did film, so this is on YouTube, so I'll leave a link to this one up here in the corner and down in the description, but this was when I was talking about using my sketchbook wrong, because I had a few comments about my work being too perfect and not sketchy enough. But I love how this turned out. This again was mixed media, so watercolour first and then some Faber-Castell gelatos on top with some coloured pencils. And this is some collage here inspired by Omar Wynne, where I tore out some brown paper. I really like that with the text on top. So just using a reference that I found online and shared in our monthly reference post on Patreon. And then, yeah, just filling this full spread. So really trying to make it feel completely covered. But again, I didn't spend too long on this, so I don't tend to spend ages on my work. I do like to work quite quickly, and I think this was quite effective. Again, using some of those references that I shared, which included this one, which was a lovely image of a bakery cart, which I really wanted to paint. And then because there were like pretzels and things, I decided to find some more references of baked goods and pretzels to add onto the page. This is another one that kind of feels unfinished. Usually I think I'd add on like colour swatches, which you'll have seen on my other pages, or some typography, but I just left it where it was. I'm really happy with the pretzels and like building up those layers and using like my raw sienna and my buff titanium to really make these feel 3D. I did add on a white Posca marker on top for the salt and like the seeds and things. Really like how this looks. Again, we've got quite a loose one here because I was working quite quickly. It wasn't to a timer because I was doing this just on my own, but I was trying to still keep that energy and be really quick. So I really like how this sits together, but again, it does still feel a little bit unfinished, but I'm still really pleased with the paintings. This was done with mostly watercolour and then some coloured pencils, just to define it. So I used my watercolour first, and then I defined some of the shapes with coloured pencil. These were done on two separate occasions. So over here on the left, this was part of the acrylic ink video that I shared. Again, I'll leave a link to that up in the cards and down below. But this was using my acrylic ink and then my Sailor Fude de Manin fountain pen on top, just to refine it a little bit more. So you can see the process of this one in that video. Really pleased with it. I love using acrylic ink. First time I've used that in this sketchbook, but it handled it really nicely. And it did mean I could go on top with the fountain pen as well as some Neocolors and pencils. The paper on this sketchbook really allows the vibrancy to show through, so I think that worked really nicely here. And then this one was part of a workshop with Omar Wynne. So she did a fundraising workshop for Myanmar, and we were painting some really lovely ingredients. So this was the warm-up, which was supposed to be a tonal study, but I decided to just go ahead and use lots of colour, and then I finished it off afterwards once it was dry, so I could add on again my fountain pen. And that was really nice just to tie it in with the other page as well, so it does sit together nicely, but also to refine the shapes and make it feel a bit more finished. So pretty quick this one, but then this one was the main painting we did on the session. So Omar shared some really lovely references, and again I used my watercolours and the fountain pen just to define them. So this was, as I said, the Burma earthquake appeal, and it was really nice to learn more about what was going on there and donate to the cause and know that it was going to the right people. But I really love how it turned out. I'm really happy with the light on some of this fruit and veg, and yeah, it was just a really lovely session. It was very emotional. It felt nice to be creating together and using art as a sort of community as well to help other people. So really pleased with how this turned out. I did use the watercolour first, and then I added on some coloured pencils on top. You can see I did come in with that white Posca as well. I've been using that a lot with Food Month. And then some Neocolors as well, just for some of the brighter shades and to add on a little bit more detail. I think the session was an hour and a half. I think this was about 45 minutes for this one. And I finished off again with that browning in my Sailor Fude de Manin pen. So a really lovely session that was hosted by Omar Wynne. So this was in April, and then for April we obviously turned to a new theme on my Patreon. So we moved from food and drink to woodlands. And this was part of the YouTube live stream that we do every month. And I did do another one in my other sketchbook from that session, but this was the watercolour one, and this was again 40 minutes. I do find that's a really good time for me to be able to stay loose but still have like quite a lot of time for one reference. Trees is something that I'm really trying to improve, and this isn't my favourite tree. I do like the light, but I still feel like it looks a little bit unnatural, and I definitely feel like my confidence is growing, having done quite a lot of tree studies this month, which are in lots of different sketchbooks, but this one was from that session, so I used gouache here, but I also used some Neocolors as well, just to get some of this bright yellow, sort of green shades here. And it was just really fun. I always love painting and drawing with my patrons, so even if I don't necessarily love the result, I always love the process, which is basically what art is all about. I'm pretty sure this one is gouache because I can see the leaves, and I think I was using the art toolkit palette I've recently set up. And talking about the art toolkit palette, I did create it for this one, so you can watch this in 2 videos ago. I filmed the whole process for setting up my gouache palette and painting plein air, so taking that outside and then creating this on location. This is quite a lot of media, so I did use the gouache palette as well as colour pencils, lots of brush pens as well, and some Neocolors. I like how full it feels. It doesn't quite capture the mood there, and I didn't quite get the distance, but I did enjoy the process. Again, it's really mindful to create outside, just listening to the birds and just spending a nice evening painting, making the most of the sunshine and just building up lots of texture and layers. So I really enjoyed this one, and as I said, you can watch the process on my channel. Then we have this one, which I created on the weekend. I didn't film this. I kind of wish I had, because I'm really pleased with how it turned out. This was also turned into the Patreon print for April, so it was turned into this print here for my postcard pal tier on Patreon. So we do an exclusive print every month that doesn't go into my Etsy shop. But I'm really happy. So I built this up from light to dark using my watercolors, and then I also added on quite a lot of media on top. So this also includes acrylic paint markers, so that's what this really dark brown is here, and some of these greens in the foreground. I was using the paint pens that I mixed up myself. And then there's also some coloured pencils as well, just to add in some of this definition. But I'm really pleased with the distance that I captured, and also how verdant and lush this feels. It doesn't quite match the reference I was using, but it does capture the woodland vibes that I wanted. So although it doesn't feel quite as deep in the forest, I'm still really pleased with this. It's pretty loose with the amount of marks, but yeah, really happy with how this one turned out. Probably actually I did say the other one was my favourite, but maybe it's this one. And then this ribbon here marks halfway in the sketchbook, and again, woodland was our theme for the month, and obviously it's not just about trees. I generally try and pick themes that are quite varied, so lots of different ideas and topics within one theme. And so I also did these mushroom studies. That was from the same weekend. Again, I didn't film it, but I used my watercolour, tried to build up some of these colours and tones gradually, and then I really have liked putting on my Fude de Manin pen on top with the brown ink. So it's the brown De Atramentis ink, which I shared in one of my hauls, but I really like how it neatens everything up. It makes it feel very intentional, and I added on the labels of each of the mushrooms as well, which I think worked really nicely. Just lots of lovely texture in here that I'm really happy with. And yeah, just really pleased with this page. It is a little bit less loose than usual, but I do really like how all the different mediums work together, and doing the different marks, especially with the ink pen. I just think this turned out really nicely. So that's halfway, so I'll be able to do the other half when this is more filled later on in the year, hopefully. But I really hope you've enjoyed that. I'd love to know which one's your favourite from here. As I said, I do have my favourites, which is this one and also this one, but do share what you think down below in the comments. Hopefully you're enjoying seeing my watercolour journey. I really am enjoying it, and I think that shows in my work. But a big thank you for watching. A huge thank you to my patrons for all of their support. I am pausing Patreon, so there won't be new content, but you can still join if you want to catch up on all the previous year's content and do that at your own pace. So I will leave a link below, but I am off on my art retreat soon that I'm running with my friend TJ, so I just needed a bit of time off to be able to really put all my concentration and my all into the retreat instead of trying to spread myself too thin. Having said that, I've still pre-recorded a few YouTube videos, so you'll still be getting videos every Sunday, and I can't wait to show you all of the work I create when I get back. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Sunday in my new YouTube video. See you later!